Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, hopefully you're having an amazing day. In this video we're going to focus on Zen 4 for both mobile as well as APUs. AMD are going to be releasing a ton of products in different market segments, and honestly all of them are pretty exciting. We've already discussed some of them previously, such as Phoenix, although this video has a considerable number of updates concerning Phoenix, and its performance targets of around an RTX 3060M are definitely tantalizing. It basically means that low-end discrete GPUs for, well, mobile anyway, essentially become all but pointless, and AMD have a ton of options for embedded solutions. And this is going to be really important going, into the next couple of years, because not only, of course, do they have to compete with Nvidia for discrete graphics, but Intel themselves are working on a lot of stuff for their own CPUs. And we're going to be discussing Intel in a separate video because, well, this one's already going to be kind of lengthy enough. And since we've already discussed Phoenix in a previous video where, again, I went over the specifications and performance targets, I want to just go over a quick update for you for Phoenix, and then we're going to jump into the rest of the stuff.
So let's start things out with AMD's Dragon range of processors. So these essentially can be thought of as AMD's Ryzen 7000 desktop processors in mobile form. They're going to sport 2 compute units, or more accurate to say, I suppose, a single workgroup processor. As this description implies, they're designed to maximize CPU performance, both in terms of clock frequency and core count. We'll get into the specifics in a moment, and will often be offered along with discrete GPU solutions. So whether that's RDNA 3 or whether that's RTX 40, what have you. The Ryzen 9 7980HX, for example, will absolutely tear through content creation and professional workloads. Speaking of that processor, we're looking at 16 cores, and then the 7900HX goes down to 12 cores, the 7800HX is 8 cores, and then, as you probably guessed, the 7600HX is going to be 6 cores. Clock frequency is going to be around 4.8 to 5 GHz plus in terms of boost, and 3.6 to 4 GHz base. But this, of course, is going to be dependent upon the laptop vendor, what TDP configuration that they're running, and so on and so on. Again, just to reiterate, guys, this is going to be for those who absolutely need as many threads, as much performance in their processor as possible. Now we're going to shift to AMD's Phoenix. This is possibly the APU which excites me the most, as someone who perhaps would be interested in shifting more of their gaming work to mobile, because this is actually shaping up to be a very impressive APU, and I suspect it could form the basis of a ton of very interesting handheld solutions. So yes, the number of CPU cores compared to Dragon has been reduced. We're looking at 8 cores versus 16 of Dragon. But this, of course, makes way for tons of additional GPU performance. Starting out with the 7980HS, it's 8 cores, 12 compute units. Now, this is basically how it's been described to me, although it's actually more accurate to say that it's 6 work group processors. There's, of course, been a ton of changes with RDNA 3's architecture. We've discussed it 100 billion times at this point, so I'm putting both of these figures here. Of course, work group processors have changed for RDNA 3. It's now 256 shaders rather than 128 of RDNA 2. But again, I'm just kind of writing this how A, one of my sources has stated it, and B, just so that we're kind of more on the same page. Shifting down the product stack though until the Ryzen 5 7600HS, it's 6 CPU cores, 6 compute units, or again, more accurate to say 3 work group processors. The clock frequency, TDP, and so on is going to be one of the differentiating factors between all of these different configurations. To my understanding, we're looking at 2.6 to 3 GHz for the iGPU clock frequency, and the CPU and work group processor count is identical to AMD's Rembrandt, although again, just to reiterate, we have the shader changes of RDNA 3. So the highest end configuration is 1536 shaders, 9.2 T-flops. This is pretty much identical to what I reported in early May, and this also is matched with the same kind of performance targets that was told in early May, basically about on par with an RTX 3060 mobile. But this is gaming and T-flop performance for the higher TDP configurations, which is going to be around 60 to 70 watts. Lower TDP configurations, such as 35 watts, is still going to perform really well, but obviously it's not going to be quite up to, the RTX 3060 level. I/O though is largely a match for AMD's Rembrandt. The main difference, of course, is it's got PCIe 5 support, and DDR5 and LPDDR5 support is basically confirmed, quote unquote, with multiple sources, although a single source has now told me that LPDDR5X at 8400 MTS is also supported. Now let's shift our focus on to some additional Phoenix information. Now, I'm actually a lot less certain about this because a single source has told me this information, and even they're a little uncertain. So I'm going to put this out there, but I really want to caveat this and say that at this point, I'm pretty low in confidence in it. Perhaps in the future I'll get more information, or maybe someone else will leak more stuff. But again, I'm going to put it out there for a that's interesting, rather than I am certain about this information. So basically, a single source has told me that Phoenix could have Infinity Cache. Now, I'm not certain about this because I've been told by another source that it simply doesn't have it, although it is possible it's a different configuration. I've even heard some rumors that AMD are working on a different version of Phoenix, which has more workgroup processors, and perhaps that's what has Infinity Cache, but this is not what this source has told me. So again, I'm not certain. I'm just putting it out there at this point, and I'm putting it out there just to really stress this, guys. I'm putting it out there as it's interesting. It's an interesting rumor, but I'm not going to tell you guys to put any faith in it yet. But what is quite interesting is that this source has told me that this design, Phoenix, is potentially chiplet based. The CPU and the I/O is basically on a single die, monolithic, but then it has a different chiplet which is for the iGPU. Now, this is possibly why we have the Infinity Cache, and the source has basically provided me a basic diagram of what this could look like. I want to stress that this is not official. And the sources also told me that it's not 100% accurate to the design that they've seen. Allegedly, they've seen this design, but they can't obviously carbon copy it and give me that exact thing because it would make it way too easy to identify the actual leaker. So they've pretty much given me a rough draft of what it looks like. It's going to be interesting if this actually proves to be true. I mean, I would love for it to be proven to be true, but yeah, let's shift down now to Mendocino. This has again been verified by a couple of different sources. Basically, I'm not going to read out all these specifications because I'll be here until tomorrow, but the top end, quote unquote, is the Ryzen 3 7420U, 4 cores, 8 threads. You can see that it's 12 to 25 watts and over 2 gigahertz for the iGPU. The lower end one is going to be the Athlon Silver, which is the 7020U. No SMT here. 4 cores, 4 threads, 6 to 12 watts, and you can see that the clock frequency on the iGPU has also been nerfed as well. This is based on AMD's Zen 2 processor architecture. It has 2 compute units, or 1 workgroup processor if you prefer. Basically, AMD see this as some kind of spiritual successor to Jaguar. If you remember this, of course, Jaguar formed the basis for the Xbox One, the PlayStation 4, and so on. So AMD do potentially see this coming to other platforms, such as AM5, or more likely something like a successor to AM1, according to the source. But yeah, the main purpose of it, as you probably guessed, is basically for ultra low power envelope devices. It's designed essentially to be super cheap to produce. And I also want to discuss Vcache, because there's been an awful lot of discussion on Vcache recently. Vcache has been really successful with the 5800X3D, both in terms of proof of concept as well as a great performance boost. AMD officially have told us, of course, that more Vcache products are incoming, including, perhaps most important for many of you, AM5. Anyway, to my understanding so far, the Ryzen 7000 Vcaches have actually entered mass production. Launch date, though, is kind of interesting. Recently, WCCF Tech had an article, and they basically found evidence, according to AMD's official statements, that it could launch as early as late this year, which would be really curious given the release date of Zen 4. You know, I mean, we could literally see it launch just a couple of months later. Now, I have heard later this year or early next year from different sources, although another source told me it was going to be more like Q2. And Grayman has said it's possibly going to be kind of early. Honestly, it's probably going to depend a lot on production, competition from Intel, and a lot of other factors, but I will say it's going to be really fast. I mean, I don't really want to repeat myself too much on this, but I suspect that we're going to see a situation where the, vanilla, quote-unquote, Zen 4s are going to be trading blows quite often with the Intel's 13th generation, but the V caches, especially on more bandwidth kind of sensitive applications, yeah, I suspect AMD are going to be quite a bit ahead. Of course, the big question is, what about pricing and stuff like that? Honestly, I don't think these things are going to be cheap. I have heard, just to repeat myself, that we are going to be looking at up to 16 cores. I've heard 8 and 16, but not 6 and 12 for the V caches. But this is only based upon a couple of murmurs that I've heard, so honestly, I wouldn't put too much stock or faith in that. Also, I want to just mention Threadrippers, since we're kind of discussing Zen 4. I've heard also a rumor that we could be seeing Vcache. Now, AMD have kind of hinted that this could be the case, but I'm just repeating it, that I have also heard this from a couple of different sources. What I don't know yet, though, is how AMD are going to be segmenting their lineup. They may not even have decided this themselves yet. For example, if we see a 64-core Threadripper processor, will it be available in both Vcache and vanilla variants, or will it simply only be available in Vcache? I don't know. It could be a kind of similar situation to what we saw with, Threadripper and then the Pro variants, how there was some stuff just to differentiate it, and AMD could do the same thing here. And obviously, you can kind of imagine how, just for example, 64 cores with Vcache is absolutely just going to rip and just destroy a lot of workloads that a lot of kind of content professionals or 3D animators or data scientists or whatever are going to be really interested in. And for those obviously who need the additional I/O, maybe that's how AMD are going to do that. But they also recently put out these statements saying that they kind of want to unify the Threadripper platform a little bit. So it's going to be interesting, honestly, how all of that plays out. I'm going to be very curious. Threadripper is one of those platforms that I've kind of always wanted to own, but I never could justify the expenditure for it. But it's a really cool platform. It's going to be really curious to see how AMD continue to market it, because obviously at the moment they're just basically handing Intel their ass in HEDT, which is kind of sad. Like, it, again, would be nice if Intel were able to offer some competition. I suspect that this is going to get a little better later on.
Well, guys, I think that's just about it for this particular video. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. If you did, you know what to do. Leave a like on the video, and because it's YouTube land, subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. And yeah, we're going to be discussing more stuff in the not too distant future. Obviously, I recently put out the PS5 Pro video, and I'm also working on one for Valve, which is going to be kind of an intriguing one, and also discussing more about the PlayStation Portable as well. But yeah, if you're interested in any of that, along with, of course, what Intel will be doing for its own iGPU/APU/ whatever you want to call it solutions, well, again, you know what to do. With that said, take care of yourselves, have an amazing day. Bye for now.